Hey, welcome back to my channel. Shaun Stevenson here, author of the Throne series, and it's time. It is time to finally talk about R.L. Stine's Goosebumps House of Shivers, Scariest Book Ever. This is the first book in the newest Goosebumps series, House of Shivers. This one came out in 2023, and it was an adventure to read, I gotta say. This one was different from other Goosebumps books that I've read, and I have a lot of thoughts about it. So, this is a spoiler-free review, but I will be doing a spoiler talk review of this book coming up in a video soon, so watch for that. So, in Goosebumps House of Shivers, Scariest Book Ever, two kids, Billy and Betty, they are on their way to their Uncle Wendell's house, and their Uncle Wendell lives out in the middle of nowhere. There's a forest around his house. It's a pretty creepy kind of place. They're not really sure. They've never met Uncle Wendell before, so they don't even know who he is really, but they're staying with him because he's the only relative who could take care of them while their parents go out of town. So the two kids are on their way to Uncle Wendell's house, and they're in for a scare, so they better beware. They get to Uncle Wendell's house, and lo and behold, Uncle Wendell does not answer the door. He's not there, but the parents leave them there and head off, and that is when everything begins, because Uncle Wendell tells Betty and Billy that he has the scariest book ever. In fact, it's the scariest book in the world, and someone is trying to get it from him. So he's trying to keep it safe, and he asks them while they are with him to help him protect the scariest book ever. So, okay, let's talk about this book. It moves really fast. It moves really quick. It was a great read. One of the interesting things about this book is it was divided into parts. So it had three parts, all divided by like part 1, part 2, part 3. And I thought that was a very interesting device for a Goosebumps book. The parts kind of break up the book into some different big twist reveals, and there are plenty of big twist reveals here. There were a couple I never saw coming and I did not even think would be part of this, and then there were some that I thought, well, that is a great twist. I think that's a really well done idea and didn't see it coming, and I loved it. So that was great. I also thought the characters Billy and Betty were really well realized, and I was wondering going into this book, since this is a newer book and comes out obviously in 2023, it's been 30 years since the original Goosebumps series came out when R.L. Stine was writing those, and I was kind of curious if this would come across dated at all. Like the characters, would they make sense for 2023? Would it make sense what was happening? And I will say there is a little bit of old style charm in the main characters, Billy and Betty. I wouldn't say that they make sense to me as like 2023 kids. Like they didn't come across like 2023 kids. They came across a little bit in the 90s, but that was okay because as a person reading this book with nostalgia on, all the nostalgia glasses on, it was interesting to see that brought back to this newer Goosebumps book, but it still held that old time idea of those 90s characters. Like some of the banter kind of reminds me of characters that would be in the 90s. I will say it's the main two kids throughout the book, which I've really come to think that the best Goosebumps and any of these types of shorter anthology-based books, I think the best ones of these are the ones where there's only two kids, there's not a whole cast of characters. I think it gets too hard to follow when there's like 4 or 5 kids that you're all trying to follow, remember all their names when the book is only 120 pages or so. 2 kids is like the perfect formula, in my opinion, for a Goosebumps style book. And that's what happens here. You have a lot of good menacing characters and you have creatures. There are some great creatures. Now, I will say, nothing ever scared me or made me think, ooh, that's kind of spooky in this book. It was much more, this one kind of reminded me a little more of a fantasy style book where 2 kids have stumbled on a magical world within the real world. So it kind of came across a little more like that than it did a a true like scary story. And especially what's interesting to me is that this book being called Scariest Book Ever, I didn't think it had that many scares. It was more like a thrilling ride that you're going all the way through. I think one of the things that I've been thinking about Goosebumps is Goosebumps reminds me a lot of the style of the Haunted Mansion ride at Disneyland, where it's macabre and there are some spooky elements, but there's nothing that's ever going to terrify you. And there's definitely nothing in this book that is terrifying. I think it's much more laid back. There are a lot of creatures and things in this book that show up, which are fun. I kind of had more fun with that than I did have a scary reaction to it, if that makes sense. So I thought that was all really well done. And I think the thing that was the most scary about it was actually someone who is in the book later on who proposes a more real world threat than any sort of supernatural threat. And I think that was the scariest part of the book, actually. So it was well done. There's a lot of good close escapes. I do feel like there weren't any like chapter endings that were fake out scares where it's like, oh, the scratching at the door, it's a cat. There was much more. There's actual danger going on. There's ominous things that are happening when they're visiting Uncle Wendell's house in the middle of nowhere. So I think that was all great. The setting is the perfect kind of setting for a Goosebumps book. A little isolated, two characters there, they're exploring for the first time, they've never been there before, and they're seeing what is happening around them and experiencing it all for the first time. So the villains in this book, I think, I'm not going to talk too much about them because that would be a spoiler, and this is a spoiler-free review. So have you read the newest Goosebumps House of Shivers book, Scariest Book Ever? The thing that I will say about this book that I think gives me an interesting hope for book number 2 that's coming out in March, Goblin Monday. You can see the preview of the next book on the back of this book. And one of the things that's interesting is the way this book ends seems to set up the rest of this Goosebumps House of Shivers series, but we'll see. I'm not sure what happens in Goblin Monday. I am not reading back matter of any of the newest books because I don't want to know, because it always, to me, I don't want to have anything spoiled. I just want to go in raw and see what happens in a Goosebumps book. So I'm not reading the back cover of Goblin Monday, even though it's posted online of the back synopsis, but I'm not taking a look at it. So, have you read Goosebumps House of Shivers Scariest Book Ever, book number 1 in the newest Goosebumps series? If so, leave a note in the comments below. What did you think of this? Also, for those of you who have read Goosebumps books from a long time ago, does this one sound intriguing to you? Does it sound right up your alley as far as what you want in a new Goosebumps series? I think this was the right direction to step away from Slappy World and Horrorland and some of those big IPs like that from the Goosebumps series, and to step into something brand new in the House of Shivers. So I would definitely give this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think it was a fun read. I think it was a quick read. And if you're looking for that little dash of Goosebumps nostalgia, this is the place to look. So definitely check this one out. And until next time, keep reading, everybody. Bye.